The most dangerous person is not the one who screams and threatens. It's the one who waits in silence. For 10 long years, I raised the boy my own sister left to die in the cold. I healed his wounds, I quieted his nightmares. And I waited. I knew a day like today would come. I just didn't know how sweet it would feel to watch her smile vanish when she realized she wasn't here for a reunion. She was here for her execution. Have you ever been so wrong that the anger becomes a part of you? A cold, patient stone in your gut? If you know that feeling, if you've ever dreamed of looking someone in the eye who destroyed you and finally turning the tables, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a story of revenge that wasn't swift but was so perfect. Let me take you back, not to the day she showed up, but to the night it all began, a night carved from shadow and rain. The phone call came at 12:47 a.m., a time that belongs to emergencies and ghosts. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Sir, we found a child on the mountain trail near Harlow Creek. Says his name is Ethan. Says you're his uncle." I remember the sound of my own breath. Not panicked, not ragged, just steady, mechanical, as if my body was already shifting into survival mode for him. The sound of a coat zipper was like a gunshot in the silent house. The roads were black glass, slick with a freezing rain, my headlights carving weak, futile tunnels through the clinging mist. And then I saw him. A small, huddled form crouched beside a police cruiser, dwarfed by the adult world of flashing lights and grim faces. His small hands were clutching a torn backpack, the fabric muddy and wet. Mud was streaked across his cheeks, tracing paths through tears that had long since gone cold. But it was his lips I remember most. How they trembled when he saw me. A tiny, frantic movement of pure, unadulterated terror. I knelt down, my own knees cracking against the wet asphalt, a sound I didn't hear. He looked at me and he said it, the words that would haunt me, that would fuel me for a decade. "Mom said I'm not wanted anymore because of her new husband." He said it like it was a fact, a simple, terrible math equation, not a wound that had severed his world in two. I didn't correct him. What could I say? I just pulled him into my arms, feeling his tiny, bird-like heart hammering against my chest, fragile, terrified, alive. That was the silence she left. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, suffocating thing that filled the walls of my house, broken only by Ethan's nightmares. I knew my sister, you see. Long before Ethan, before the husband, before she polished her cruelty into something presentable. We were siblings once by blood. Then we were strangers by choice. I remember our father's funeral. She arrived late, oversized sunglasses still on as they lowered the casket into the earth. She said she couldn't handle goodbyes, so I handled everything else for her. The debts she called unavoidable, the lies she called misunderstandings, the trail of people she used until they broke, who she called friends. She always had a talent for escape, for slipping out the back door just as the consequences arrived. When she abandoned Ethan, I told myself it was the end, the final unforgivable line. But people like her, they don't have endings. They only have intermissions. They pause, they hide, they rebuild a shiny new life on the graves of their old ones until they need something again. And the signs started about 6 months ago. Anonymous letters with no return address, filled with vague, wistful language about motherhood. A lawyer's discreet inquiry about custody records, phrased like a simple background check. A private investigator, all cheap suit and softer questions, asking neighbors about the welfare of the boy. She was testing the fences, seeing if the scars had healed enough that she could scratch them open again. So I got to work. While she was rebuilding her life under her new, pristine name, Leah Foster, loving wife of a wealthy investor, I was in the trenches. I gathered everything, the original police report, every word a condemnation. The photos from that night, Ethan's hollow eyes, the mud, the terror. The psychologist's damning statements about the profound trauma of abandonment. I learned the system's weaknesses, the dusty archives and forgotten files. And then, I learned how to use them. I rebuilt Ethan too, not with expensive things, but with the things that cost me everything: time, patience, stability, private school, therapy, Saturday morning pancakes, and promises that I would never, ever break. He never asked about her, and I never volunteered the answers, but a part of me, the big brother who had always cleaned up her messes, waited. I waited for the day she'd come back, pretending to be a mother. And then, this morning, she stood on my porch like she owned the very air. Time hadn't ruined her, it had made her polished. An expensive ring glittered on her finger, a symbol of her manicured guilt. Her perfume was heavy, cloying, an apology you could smell. "I'm here for my son," she said, her voice lighter than I remembered, almost sweet. I let her words hang between us, settling like ash. From the kitchen, I could hear Ethan washing dishes, humming the same soft, unsure tune he used to when he was 5, a habit of safety. "Your son?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. I didn't give her the satisfaction of my drama. "You mean the boy you left in the mountains at midnight?" She flinched. A quick reptilian flicker in her eyes, then it was gone, smoothed over by a practiced mask of remorse. "I was scared," she pleaded, the lie so easy on her tongue. "Things were complicated, but I've changed. He deserves to know his mother." She thought this was her redemption arc. She had no idea she was already a guest star in my story's final act. "Ethan," I called, my voice soft but carrying. He stepped into the doorway. My boy. Taller than me now, with a quiet strength in his eyes that he'd earned the hard way. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. He didn't. He just watched her. "Do you know who this is?" I asked him. He looked at her for a long, long time. No anger, no tears, just a calm, devastating assessment. Then, his voice steady as stone, he said, "Yeah, you're the woman who left me." It wasn't an accusation. It was a verdict. She took a step forward, her hand fluttering to her chest. "I was sick. I needed help. I thought—" "No." He cut her off, his voice flat. "You thought about yourself." "That's my boy." I motioned her inside. "Come in," I said, my tone deceptively calm. "We should talk about custody, right?" A smile touched her lips, small and triumphant. That's the thing about people like her. They always mistake the invitation for mercy. I led her into the living room, the same room where, for years, I'd held Ethan after his nightmares. And there, on the simple oak coffee table, sat a single, plain manila folder. She noticed it immediately. Her eyes, so full of performative sadness, sharpened with a predator's instinct. "What's this?" she asked, her sweet tone now edged with metal. "Everything you're looking for," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. She opened it. Her perfectly manicured fingers, which had never once wiped away Ethan's tears, now traced the words that would end her. I watched her face as she read. The color first drained from her cheeks, then flooded back in a blotchy, ugly red. Inside was a curated collection of her ruin. The police report, dated and signed with the words "willful child abandonment," circled. The photos of Ethan from that night, a visceral punch to the gut. The psychologist's evaluation detailing the severe and lasting emotional damage. And finally, a letter from my attorney. It outlined the pending charges I had meticulously filed. Child abandonment, fraud for the aliases she'd used, perjury in her new, shiny life. All of it, tied neatly with a legal bow to her new legal identity, Leah Foster. The identity she thought was buried. Her hands began to shake, making the papers rustle like dead leaves. You can't," she stammered, her voice cracking, the polish finally chipping away to reveal the rust beneath. "I already did," I said, my voice still calm. "A flat, placid lake after a storm has passed. Your husband will see the news by morning. The board of his firm will follow by noon. Your world, the one you built on the back of the sun you threw away, will unravel, exactly as mine did 10 years ago." I leaned closer, close enough to see the terror in her eyes, and I finally let a sliver of my own ice-cold anger show. "The difference? I'll be awake for it." She looked up at me, her eyes wet but not with remorse, with the shock of being caught. "Why?" she whispered. I leaned in, my final words a promise and a condemnation. "Because justice doesn't knock. It waits." She left without another word. The echo of the door closing felt like the last page of a heavy book finally turning. Ethan came and stood beside me, a solid, quiet presence. "She's not coming back, is she?" he asked, his voice devoid of fear. I looked at my nephew, my son in every way that mattered. "No," I said. "She never really came back at all." If this story of patient, calculated justice gave you chills, then do me a favor. Smash that like button, it really helps the channel. And I have to ask, what as the most satisfying, they had it coming, moment you've ever witnessed? Tell me in the comments below. And of course, subscribe for more stories about karma getting a little help from those who were wronged. Thanks for watching.